Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. For you today, we've got another fantastic interview from another researcher on the ground. And again, it's something that's completely different to what we usually talk about. Today, we're going to be talking about brain fitness with neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Hill. How's it going, Dr. Hill?
It's great, Sam. Thanks for having me today.
Absolute pleasure. Great to have a neuroscientist on the show. I don't think we've had a neuroscientist yet. So you're the first, so congratulations.
I feel honored, thanks.
Absolutely. Now, you're the lead neuroscientist for truBrain, as well as you recently founded a peak brain performance institute in LA as well, called Peak Brain Institute. So that kind of basically means that you're very well qualified to talk about brain fitness, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, tell us how you got into this crazy world of brain performance and neuroscience and all that jazz.
So, I have a PhD in what's called cognitive neuroscience. Neuroscience is a broad field, and cognitive neuroscience is the intersection of mind and brain, essentially. And what I study, what I get my PhD in, was human attention, or how we sort of have the experience of directing our minds, directing our brain resources, the sort of cognitive or intentional resources. And I've always been one of these folks that takes everything apart and wants to know how things work, and that just sort of got extended to the most complicated machine that we know about. So I eventually went back to grad school after doing many years out in the sort of trenches, working with all kinds of brains that are impaired through developmental reasons or injury or psychiatric problems, and then eventually started working more in gerontology and aging fields. And all that sort of has come together, and now my clinical work, my one-on-one work, is in helping individual brains perform better. And then, of course, as you mentioned, I helped design truBrain, which is a nootropic product, which is more of a consumer sort of play to help people broadly. So the other thing I do is I teach courses at UCLA on brain aging, neuroscience, gerontology, psychology. So I'm trying to keep my hand in everywhere a little bit, and teaching, academia, research, clinical work, and a little bit of everything all at once. So
everything. So it sounds like a good approach, really, to kind of have that broad range of things going on, because you don't get too kind of focused on one thing, or too blinkered maybe on one thing. But to start off with, when I was kind of perusing, particularly the Peak Brain Institute website, I saw that you had brain fitness as a term that you use. So what would you classify as brain fitness? Because to some people that might sound crazy. Oh, for some reason we've lost Dr. Andrew Hill, guys. So just give us a second whilst he recalibrates his oh, is he back? Dr. Hill, are you there? This rarely happens. But in the meantime, whilst we're just getting back Dr. Andrew Hill, just to let you guys know, truBrain is these nice little pouches, which is kind of a bit of an alternative. Oh, Dr. Hill, are you back?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's all good. It's all good. I was just about to explain about truBrain whilst you just left us just momentarily. Just the fact that the folks at home, they're basically kind of alternatives to coffee, or kind of like little pick-me-ups kind of during the day that aren't so detrimental as fizzy energy drinks. Essentially, and just so the folks at home know, they can get a 30% discount on all truBrain products if they go to smashthefat.com/TB, and then they can put in the coupon code SMASH and they get a 30% discount and all that. So what exactly are these crazy products that you helped design?
Yeah, so those are nootropic blends. Nootropics, broadly speaking, are brain-enhancing compounds. They can be smart drugs, they can be amino acids, or supplements, or a broad range of things. truBrain, we picked sort of the best in class of active nootropics. Nootropics, again, being brain-enhancing things, and so everything in the truBrain tends to be something that supports either the cellular metabolism of brain cells, or it supports in some way your focus, your relaxation, your better concentration. So you're right. We took a different approach than the typical energy drink, if you will, style of doing things. And there's not very much sugar at all in the truBrain Think drinks. There's just a few grams of carbohydrates. And there's really nothing in the way of heavy lifting caffeine. There is caffeine in one of the formats of truBrain, but the other formats are caffeine free. So we sort of took an alternative approach and used things in them like paracetam and theanine and magnesium and carnitine and tyrosine. And then in the capsule product, we also have some omega-3 fatty acids, which didn't go in the drink because of shelf stability reasons mostly. So we sort of think that there's a pretty broad sort of wild west of ingredients out there that people are playing around with and biohacking and trying different things. And the truBrain 1.0 formulation was really my attempt with some other folks to curate a best starting place for folks who are interested in nootropics, but get overwhelmed by looking through all the crazy compounds and random nonsense out there on the internet. So this was initially just like a consumer curation place saying, okay, well, here's the best starting place for nootropics, and we can go from there. And then the drinks, of course, were our refining of that value proposition for people.
Excellent. What exactly?
Sorry, the video cut out. Can you say that again?
Oh, what exactly are nootropics?
Yeah, so broadly,
I assume that we pronounce.
Sure. To define the word, I tend to go after the initial definition, which is something that improves cognition without any appreciable side effects. And that means things that help you concentrate, be less distracted, but also means things that help you stay a little more relaxed and less stressed. And so there are things in most nootropic approaches, certainly in truBrain, that help you be a little more focused, and also some things that help you be a little bit more relaxed. So, for instance, tyrosine is in truBrain, which is the raw material to produce the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is what gets boosted by all stimulants. But if you boost it directly, you get side effects from stimulants. You get habit formation. It can cause some problems. Anything that affects dopamine tends to be a little bit unsustainable long term. So instead of going after like a Ritalin or Adderall or other psychostimulant, if you feed the raw materials with the dopamine sort of precursor or tyrosine, you might have a more subtle support for your attention system. Just as one example for one ingredient. And everything else in the product is sort of designed to either boost attention or to buffer sort of over arousal. Folks, certainly in the UK, you guys are familiar with tea. Tea may be among the first nootropics used broadly across the world, and the benefits of tea are largely the caffeine and the L-theanine, which is a calming neurotransmitter. It's GABA provoking, if you will. GABA is a neurotransmitter in the brain that helps you feel calm and relaxed. Alcohol releases GABA, so that warm feeling you have after a pint, that's a GABA feeling. Not necessarily ideal to have that amount, but in combination with some caffeine push, which is more adenosine and dopamine, the theanine tends to balance any arousal or activation you get from the more stimulating nootropics. So whether you're going after a sort of pre-made stack or blend like truBrain, or if you're preparing your own nootropic approach and you're finding random chemicals and substances and trying to craft the best approach for yourself, I think you need to think about ways of supporting maybe a lack of energy, as well as or supporting over arousal as well. So for us in truBrain, it was theanine was on that buffering side because it releases GABA in case you're a little bit overstressed or overactivated. But we also included things like magnesium, which helps nerve cells fire, but also helps you feel a little more calm and relaxed if, again, you're sort of stressed out. So we're sort of talking about performance in this sweet spot where it's really important to be a little bit alerted or physiologically aroused, but not so much that your judgment and your attention is overwhelmed, because then performance impairs. So in general, brain performance, brain health is all about getting enough arousal, enough stimulation, enough engagement to help you feel like you're using your mind fluidly, but not so much that you're overwhelmed or burnt out. And whatever your brain health strategies are, everything needs to be sort of pointed at keeping you in that sweet spot. If you're under sort of fed or under maybe your nutrition status isn't great, you'll have more needs in terms of fats and proteins than somebody else might. But regardless, we still have to sort of gauge where our day-to-day engagement is with our stressful environments. And nootropics can be a strategy to help us have a little more even-keeled performance through the day-to-day challenges that we all experience. Because our performance is not static at an amazingly high level all day long, every day, generally. I mean, that's why I have things like this giant mug of coffee that I start with. Actually, I didn't start there. I've already been up for a few hours, and I did an hour and a half of Ashtanga yoga first thing this morning. So I'm rewarding myself with caffeine, but there are other things besides simply nootropics that are required for a healthy brain. And the most important is, of course, a healthy body. The brain is part of the body. The brain is made out of largely fat. And so having a healthy diet that has good, strong, high qualities of good fats and low amounts of sugars, and then a lot of physical exercise, those are as critical for brain health as something like a nootropic or a cognitive style of dealing with your day, which is engaged as opposed to overwhelmed. So, there's psychology here, there's physiology, and then there's all about keeping the physical machine intact enough to handle the stressors you're throwing at it. And that's as much about the body as it is about the brain, typically. So,
fantastic. And kind of gauging from that, from what you've just said, as well as kind of researching everything that you've spoke about in kind of previous podcasts with other people and things. It's obviously a whole approach that you need to take with that. And kind of with that in mind, I'd like to find out what exactly is your daily routine for peak brain fitness. It sounds like you start off the day with some yoga and then a bit of coffee.
I do, yeah. I start off the day with typically about an hour to an hour and a half of Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga yoga is a style of yoga that's typically done in a way that is self-paced, which means you show up at the studio and you start your practice, and the instructor walks over and corrects you, quietly and gently occasionally. But it's not a lead class where there's someone saying, lift your arm, do this, step forward. And without the verbal track of somebody speaking at you for that hour and a half, this style of yoga is repetitive breathing and motion or movement that is flowing from one pose to the other. So it actually does allow you to drop into a pretty good meditative state without the audio, without the language component. So if I make it to yoga and my teacher's happy that I'm there, then I get my meditation in as well as my physical exercise. If I don't make it to yoga, then I typically spend at least 20 minutes sitting on a cushion, doing a 5-minute concentration practice for meditation, and then a 15 minutes awareness or insight practice. And that essentially stabilizes and then allows some flexibility of attention. And so for me, the first somewhere between half an hour and a half of my day is spent doing either yoga and meditation. And then I have typically a giant vat of coffee with no sugar in it and lots of full fat cream. And I typically have some sort of fat and protein source within the first couple hours of the day, usually something that involves eggs.
Yeah.
Big fan of, simple eggs. And I'm one of those folks who tends to lean pretty heavily towards a primal or paleo or low starch, low sugar, high fat diet. I think that's a pro brain health diet. A high fat, no sugar diet essentially is what your brain needs.
Yeah.
We think about insulin in the body and being very critical to manage not only our physical health and energy, but like our waistlines. Insulin management or not spiking your blood sugar is critical for that. But it's potentially more critical for the brain. There's some evidence now that some of the things we think about as diseases of aging are actually sort of secondary problems to dysregulated blood sugar in the body. So sort of the Western diet, the metabolic syndrome that we all tend to carry around if we aren't eating carefully, if we're just eating all the carbohydrates that Westerners tend to eat. That sort of pre-diabetic state also causes a stress on the insulin system in the brain. And between the dysregulation of insulin signaling and the inflammation that can come from that, the risks for all of the diseases of aging of the brain go up dramatically, and that would include things like Alzheimer's, cancer, and diabetes. So, we think of these as sort of body things, but they are just as important in the brain, especially some of the blood sugar issues with the most extreme sort of cognitive declines with aging, which are in things like Alzheimer's and other dementias. And there does seem to be a blood sugar component to those, the progression of those diseases. So,
because I've heard Alzheimer's described as almost type 3 diabetes as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's definitely a factor, and dysregulated sugar system in the brain is absolutely impairing tissue health per se. That being said, it's not the only factor. I mean, even in type 1 or type 2 diabetes, the only factor is not the insulin. There's often an autoimmune component, especially in type 2, or sorry, maybe type 1. There's often sort of sensitization, dysregulation of the feedback processes in the body. That will happen as well in the dementias and Alzheimer's. And it's not only, probably, this is my guess, it's not only sort of a sugar problem. It's at least as much of a problem as all the other wear and tear and damage you can do to your brain. We discovered, or scientists discovered in the past year, or maybe a year and a half, that one of the reasons why we sleep is actually to wash the brain. The brain is surrounded by blood vessels, and that's one of its circulatory systems, but it also has several chambers and a lot of fluid surrounding the brain called cerebral spinal fluid. It's a mostly clear fluid that contains some chemicals, and it sort of washes the brain and pulls toxins out from around cells and flushes them out and down your spine, essentially, and out of the brain. That washing, actually an agitation cycle like in an old washing machine, that happens in the brain during slow wave sleep. Slow wave sleep is delta sleep or dreamless sleep. So the deepest, most dreamless sleep you have is necessary to wash toxins out of brain cells, essentially. And so without that, chronic sleep deprivation means that inflammation goes up and other sort of dramatic factors in brain health go down. And you can see this in brains,
Okay, we seem to have lost Dr. Hill again briefly. Hopefully he'll be back soon enough. But just whilst he's away again, I'll just give you a couple of places where you can catch all things Dr. Andrew Hill. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew Hill PhD, and you can also check out his Peak Brain Institute at peakbrainla.com. And then finally, again, if you do want to check out the products that Dr. Hill has helped design, if you go to smashthefat.com/TB, that'll take you straight through to the truBrain.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, there we go. I was just keeping everybody busy.
Great.
But yeah, as you were, Doc.
Yeah, I forget what I was saying before Google Hangouts cut us off a little bit. But essentially, everything in the brain is dependent on things in the body to a very large extent. We think about sort of quote unquote diseases of aging being things like Alzheimer's, cancer, and diabetes. These things are all heavily influenced by sort of baseline inflammation and baseline stressors on the body and the brain. And as I was mentioning a moment ago, the brain is washed in delta sleep, deep slow wave sleep, And without this washing, without this sort of cleaning of the brain over time, the brain develops more and more inflammation. And we end up with brains that are sleep deprived looking a lot like brains that are depressed. And so in young people who are heavily sleep deprived, their brains look much older and more impaired simply by being under-rested. And in elder brains, when you have sleep deprivation, you have increased sort of risk factors for lots of other psychiatric and mental health problems because of the stressors of inflammation and long-term sort of stress in the brain. And that's enhanced by things like high sugar diets. So there's lots of things you can do to improve brain health, but the most bang for the buck, the first thing everyone should do is drop all of the excess sugars and starches out of their diet and bring back in a sort of high-fat, very rich, yummy kind of diet.
And cholesterol.
Exactly. Cholesterol is an essential nutrient, right? Without cholesterol, we do not survive. It's used in every cell membrane. It's used to make every cell. It's used to make lots and lots of hormones, so you don't make testosterone or estrogen or things without cholesterol. So these things are fairly critical in terms of long-term body and brain health, and it's very necessary that we manage these things. So, cholesterol has been vilified for the past 30, 40, 50 years, but it doesn't actually have all that established health risks unless you're talking about very specific circumstances. Cholesterol causes problems when there's excess sugar on board in the body, not when there's simply excess fat or even saturated fat. You can be bathing in bacon and drinking bacon, smoothies all day long, but if it's not an excess of sugar in your diet, the body should be able to handle it just fine. And what raises quote unquote bad cholesterol is not typically dietary fats, it's dietary sugars. So I think we've really misunderstood cholesterol, and it's really this wonderful substance we need, but we need it in the absence of sort of dysregulated sugar behavior, if you will, because that will simply cause the small fat molecules in our system to oxidize and cause inflammation faster, which is not, of course, ideal.
Now, it sounds like sleep is obviously a massive component in this, and sleep is a massive problem for a lot of people. So what are your kind of top tips for getting good sleep?
Sure. Well, the most important one is to not think that because you're able to function on 5 or 6 hours that you should. We have this sort of full catastrophe living style of, hey, I'm a workaholic and it's a badge of honor. That's not necessarily ideal for brain health. And so having a regular amount of sleep is the first thing I would say. It's very important to get a solid amount of sleep. And that's different depending on an individual. Some folks function fine on 6 hours. Other folks need 8. It doesn't really matter what it is as an absolute number. You'll figure that out. But we all know if we're a little bit sleep deprived, and we really should be able to mediate that a little bit better. So regularity is the first thing, and one way to help that is to get up in the morning at the same time every day. Sleep hacking is all about helping your body learn when it's morning and learn when it's time to go to bed, and getting your own internal circadian rhythm synchronized with the Earth's photoperiod, the light-dark cycle. And there's several things the brain looks for to help it know when it's morning time. One of those is essentially the frequency of light that's in the sky when we get up. And if that signal is similar most days, if the light is about the same temperature, if you will, in the air, in the morning the brain learns that and becomes much better at sort of resetting its circadian rhythm. So getting up in the morning at the same time is much more important than when you go to bed to help that signal, help that entrainment signal of the frequency of light. And so 7 days a week, get up at 6:30 or 7:30, whenever you can get up, and do it every single day the same way. If you haven't been doing that, you will find that a couple weeks in, it's actually easier to get out of bed. Your brain doesn't seem to care that every so often you've gotten 4 or 5 hours. In other days, you're getting 8 hours. If you're always getting up at the exact same time of day, there's a stronger entrainment signal to regulate the sort of arousal response and shrugging off the sleep inertia you might have from less sleep than you might want otherwise have gotten. The other thing you can do if you're having trouble with your sleep cycle is get some light in your face in that first hour after dawn. Because in that first hour, the frequency, the bandwidth of light is contains more of the bandwidth that our brain uses to reset the circadian rhythm. It's more present in the air, if you will, early in the morning. And once the sun is deeper in the sky, up higher, less of that gets through, and it's harder to get a good entrainment signal in the eyes. So a strong hack is to get up at the same time every day, and in the first hour after dawn, go outside and get a few minutes of light in your face. It's a great sort of reset, and you can do this day to day as well as
at the moment, because obviously you live in California, right?
Exactly.
So here in London at the moment, it gets dark. It's now 4:30 and it's pitch black outside. And then it doesn't get properly light until about 7:30 in the morning at the moment. So kind of what would you just prescribe there? Would you prescribe to actually get a blue light to get that light in the first hour? Because some people will be getting up at say 7, maybe even 6 o'clock. So
and that might be before dawn, certainly. And I would say that it still makes sense to try to get the first light in your face. If somebody gets up an hour before dawn, still get that first light if you can. And it doesn't really matter if it's bright sunlight over a clear dawn, or if it's through the sort of, I've been to the UK. I know that it can be a little bit foggy and gray. I still think a lot of light does get through in spite of heavy clouds. Maybe not a lot of visible light, but it's not only visible light that seems to reset these frequencies. So, in spite of it being not as enjoyable as strolling out to the Malibu beach or the Santa Monica beach and seeing the sunrise over the, or across the water or something, it's still useful to get a little bit of that morning light. The other big hack that sleep sort of psychologists will talk about in terms of sleep hygiene is don't do anything else in bed except for sleep as a sleep hack. Now, that's maybe not as, there's other things you might want to do in bed. Some things that are just a habit, like watching television or doing work on your laptop. Those things should just be really canned. You should not do those things in bed. You'll train your body better for something else. Now, there's other things that some of us do in bed, especially if we have partners. Go right ahead. But otherwise, if you're going to bed, make bed about, it's sleep time, and your body will get much better at transitioning into sleep because of the sort of cue dependent signals you get about, it's bedtime, it's the bedroom. Typically you go to bed within half an hour you're asleep. If you reinforce that behavior, your brain and body gets better at triggering that when it sees the cues of the bedroom and the bed and turn off your light and things. So sleep hacking first thing in the morning is more critical than when you go to bed. But in terms of when you go to bed, only sleep in the bedroom as a way of enhancing sleep.
Is that kind of like when you get up at the same time? Because I tend to, as well as on the weekend, I still get up at the same time. Just not through kind of an alarm, but just through the fact that my body just kind of wakes up at the same time. Is that kind of connected in there?
It is. Yeah. And exactly, the fact that you wake up at the same time, even on weekends, would suggest your body is strongly regulated and knows when morning is. 10, 20,000 years ago, we didn't have weekends. It wasn't like, oh, great, it's a Saturday, I'm not going to go hunt for my food today. The sun came up, it came in our cave or under our tree or whatever, it woke us up, and we went off and, about our day. This sort of artificial, some days we get up and we function, other days we don't, is very unusual, evolutionarily implausible, way to run the brain. And so I think that the fact that your brain wakes you up on the weekends at 6:30, whatever, is wonderful. It means your brain is strongly regulated. It means you have, a really tightly entrained circadian rhythm against the Earth's photoperiod. That's all wonderful, and I would say it's a sign of brain health. That you're like, it's Saturday morning at 6:30. Why am I awake? That's wonderful. Meditate now. That's what you should do.
Yeah,
get up, do something with that brain instead of cursing your lap.
Yeah, that's it. I never do, because I don't know. I just I can't stay in bed beyond like 8 o'clock is like the latest I can ever stay in bed. It's usually about 7 o'clock that I'll be up at on the weekend. That is usually more like 6 o'clock during the week. But With meditation, you were kind of mentioning there. When's the best time to do that? Is it best to do that in the morning, or is there an optimal time at all to do it?
I'm not sure. I think the best time to do it is every day at some point. It's not so much about the amount of meditation you do, it's about the regularity of the practice. This changes the brain over time and also teaches you skills about strengthening and directing your attention systems, which involves not just focus or the sort of resource being brought online, but it involves the flexibility and the ability of the mind and brain to switch gears when the environment is chaotic. That's a resiliency of attention that comes with meditation. But just like going to the gym, you wouldn't go to the gym like 25 hours in a row and then not at all for the next 3 weeks. Very little benefits accrue when you hit the body hard and then don't teach it to do something again and again. So I think that meditation is best done with regularity. I suggest that folks start with a 20-minute practice every day. I don't think it really matters if it's morning or evening or midday. I prefer to do it first thing in the morning only because I think it can change the tenor of the entire day. I think you can get more out of your day if you meditate in the morning. I mean, people always tell me they don't have time to meditate. And my response to that is, well, okay, but if you meditate, you get that time back. If you spend 20 minutes in the morning meditating, your reactivity, your information processing, your stress level, all of these things go down in a way that makes you much more efficient at using your mind. And so you blow through stressful tasks, you blow through difficult things, and suddenly it's mid-afternoon and you've been incredibly productive, and all that time you spend on the cushion in the morning has come back to you multiply. So if folks are complaining about not having time to meditate, my advice is to meditate more, not less.
And that'll give you time back.
You absolutely do, yeah. And it really changes how you do it. So, if you have 20 minutes to meditate, do it in the morning. If you have 40 minutes, you could split it up if you want. If you don't have 20 minutes, then you need to meditate for an hour. That's the advice.
And is there any starting point for meditation, like particular practices?
I don't think it matters a whole lot, honestly, and people will find different practices. But I think the basic practices are still fairly reliable ways to train your attention. And by basic, I mean the classic techniques of single point awareness, which is a concentration practice, and present time awareness, which is called an insight practice. The classical names for these things would be samatha for concentration or single point awareness, and vipassana for present time awareness or insight or flexible attention. And when I teach people to do this, I simply have them pay attention to the sensation of air crossing their upper lip, this very narrow sensation. And that's the samatha, the single point. And I have them do that for 5 minutes, really pay attention to just the sensation right there in the upper lip. And then after 5 minutes, switch to a more broad attention where you're watching something rhythmic or cyclical, like you're breathing, your chest expanding and contracting as you breathe in and out. So start off present time. After a few minutes of that, the attention stabilizes, and then switch to a more open frame or broad focus where you're watching more rhythmic things like listening to the cars go by your street or something, or the rhythm of your body opening and closing as you breathe.
Fantastic. Again, we've lost Dr. Hill there, just whilst he was getting really into the meditation. And I'll ask him in a moment about what apps and things he recommends. But just for now, we're just going to have to be patient until Dr. Hill comes back online. I'm sure he'll just be a moment. I'm not sure if there's something going on the interwebs between here and California, but yeah.
Hey. Sorry, some network problems, I guess.
Yeah, I was speculating. But I was just asking you what apps that you recommend at all?
Sure. So for meditation, there's an app called Insight Timer. It's a very basic app, and what I like about it is that I can pick different bells, different sounds. And the way that I teach people to meditate is I say, make your meditation app play 3 bells at the beginning and end of your meditation, and a single bell maybe 5 minutes in. And when you're starting to meditate, allow yourself to be relaxed, close your eyes, and listen to the bells. and try to notice the last sound, the last moment of the third bell. And so as you listen to the 3 bells, allow your attention to sort of focus on the sounds and notice that moment of transition from sound into silence on the 3rd bell. And then at the end of that tone, start your concentration practice. After 5 minutes, you hear the bell, the single bell, and then switch to the more open focus or Vipassana practice where you're watching sort of things flowing in and out of your awareness. I think the trick is not some complicated technique. The trick is regularity and doing it. Nobody feels good at meditation when they start. It's not actually difficult. And people often have this idea that meditation is making your mind blank, or that you're not doing it right if you can't get to a blank mind. That's not actually the point of meditation. The exercise of meditation is attending in some specific way, and then you have a mind, so it gets distracted. You get hungry. You think about things that happened yesterday. Your knee hurts. You have a fantasy. Whatever. You're planning your day. This happens when you meditate. You notice that you've gotten distracted away from the object of meditation, and then you move your mind back to the object of meditation. And that cycle of notice I've been distracted and redirect back to whatever it is you're trying to attend to, that is the act of meditation. Notice, redirect. Oh, distracted, redirect. My knee hurts, redirect. I'm hungry, redirect. Again and again and again. And that is it. That's all meditation really has to be. Very simple to do, but kind of difficult to get good at, where you practice it and you get progressively better at sort of allowing more space between your thoughts, allowing thoughts to sort of land in the pool of your mind, and the ripples then sort of still again, instead of one thought causing another splash, which causes another splash, and this whole cascade of activity. That's typically how most of us act and regulate our brains. But if we meditate, the default mode tends to be a quieter mode internally over time. Meditation is not blanking your mind, but concentrating and practicing flexibility and stability of attention leads to a slightly more spacious and quiet mind over time. So going to the gym is not being jacked. That's a function of going to the gym. Quiet mind is a function of meditating, not the act of meditating.
Fantastic. Because I've had quite a lot of experience with meditation at the London Buddhist Centre, which is just down the road from me, and it's a fantastic thing to do. And particularly here in London, you can just go to a Buddhist centre and kind of make a donation of a couple of pounds and join in with a meditation. And the beginners one is very good. It's kind of very introductory, nicely kind of structured, not too intimidating. And kind of when I built up to kind of the intermediate levels where there's less guidance and it's kind of more focused within yourself and things, then I had this crazy experience where I don't know where it came from, but I kind of, whilst I was probably about 20 minutes in or something, I kind of felt like I had tree roots coming out of my body, sinking into the ground. It was almost like a hallucination, even though my eyes were shut and everything, but it was like something out of Avatar or something. Actually,
it sounds like an absorption practice. There's a classic style of meditation experiences that one classic school of meditation pursues, and these are called the jhanas, Jhana, and these are absorption experiences. And there's sort of 8 or 10 classic experiences people have, from feeling rooted to having bursts of light in their awareness. These are not necessarily the style of meditation that I encourage folks to go after long term. Concentration is very absorbing. It feels really good when you get into those states.
Yeah.
But I like to teach people to change their attention back and forth. So I have you do concentration practices for 5 or 10 minutes, and then switch to more open focus so that you can remain flexible and use that attention. But I wanted to mention, going to a community of meditators is huge and wonderful. From a classic Buddhist perspective, the 3 refuges, the 3 gems in Buddhism are the Sangha, the Buddha, and the Dharma, meaning the Sangha is the meditation community. It's really hard to sit on a cushion by yourself for an hour in your apartment or whatever. 20 minutes in, the phone rings, your knee hurts, you're hungry. There's no social pressure to sit there any longer, and you get up and break your meditation. But if you're in a meditation center once a week even, and we do a 45-minute meditation, 20 minutes in, your knee hurts, but no one else is moving, and so you kind of let that go and sit there for another 20 minutes. That's key, I think. It's important to have that support in doing that. And then just to finish off, the other two gems would be the Buddha, meaning the example. Buddha's not a deity, nor is Buddhism really a cosmological religion. It has very little attention paid to non-ordinary reality. It's more about reducing suffering in this world, in this physical, piece you were at. And so the Buddha, the gem in Buddhism is the example of, yes, if you meditate, your mind suffers less. And then, of course, the Dharma, meaning reality, how things actually work. Don't rail against having a mind. Learn to, make friends with your mind and your internal landscape. So I think even though these are a little bit more spiritual and have a religious trapping, these are basic features of cognition. And I view Buddhism as sort of ancient psychology more than anything else. And if you read the classic Buddhist texts on the mind, as the Satipatthana Sutta, it reads like a psychology 101 textbook. Your mind does this, and then your mind does this, and then your mind does this. Do something with your mind. I mean, that's really what these old books are about. They're really psychology textbooks and not sort of spiritual treatises about like how the world works. They're more about, dude, get control of your mind because that's what matters. So we have access to that. All of us now, we carry around our minds. We can meditate. We carry around our butts. There's no technology required to hack your mind through mindfulness or meditation. And so, earlier we talked about sleep and now meditation. Those are accessible. Yes, if you want to start hacking with nootropics or neurofeedback or other, more involved things, go for it. And there's lots of gains to be had there. But the first thing you can do is get your diet sorted, get your sleep sorted, and get your meditation sorted. And you can make more gains with those three things than probably anything else. And once those are sorted, then you can build on that really nice foundation of a strong, resilient mind, and the gains you get from more aggressive biohacking through nootropics or neurofeedback or something else will be really sustainable on a foundation of healthy, resilient brain.
Fantastic advice. And I think that's a good place to finish. Because it's great to hear that you need a strong foundation on which to build, and kind of the things like the nootropics you can kind of after you've done these kind of basic foundational things first, which is fantastic to hear. Were there any other pearls of wisdom that you wanted to give us, Doc, before you have to go?
I think that if folks are trying to address the things that they can address, that's wonderful. The other thing that happens with our brains is we often think of them as mysterious. I mean, it's this 3-pound blob of jelly behind our eyes that we have very little understanding of. Even neuroscientists like myself, who work with the brain all day long, have very little idea about how it works. I mean, very little. That being said, with the accessible tools of everything from diet, exercise, meditation, neurofeedback, nootropics, you have an incredible array of tools at your disposal now to change how your brain and mind works. So if you're distractible or stressed or not sleeping right or have ADHD or have some PTSD or triggers or something else, okay, that's the brain you have right now, but the brain changes. Its whole job is to change in pattern based on the world it's experiencing. So don't be satisfied if you don't like your brain. If you're distractible or stressed or overwhelmed, you can change it. And these first 3 techniques of diet, meditation, and sleep hacking will make a lot of it'll shore up a lot of deficits for people. But from there, you can do more. So don't be satisfied. Don't just think that oh, it's my brain. This is how I am. I mean, if you had a broken arm, you would get an X-ray. You would look at the break. You would splint it, and a few weeks later, you would do physical therapy and have a stronger arm when you're done. You should have the same perspective on your brain. Let me look at my brain, do some maybe what's called a QEEG, a quantitative EEG, see that, oh, I have distractibility patterns and some hypervigilance, and therefore I should do this form of neurofeedback and that form of meditation. We have technology. At no other time in history have we had as much understanding and as much traction on making a change to this little wet organ behind our eyes. So don't be satisfied. If your brain isn't doing what you want, change it.
Fantastic. Now that only leaves us one more thing to do that we do with all of our interviewees, and that's to hear us smash it out. So on the count of 3, I want you to shout "smash it out" to the camera. So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out.
Awesome. There you go. Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. It's been an absolute pleasure. And just so the folks at home are reminded, you can check out Dr. Hill's Peak Brain Institute at peakbrainla.com, on Twitter at Andrew Hill PhD. And then finally, if you want to check out the products that Dr. Hill has helped design, you can go to smashthefat.com/B, which will take you straight through to the truBrain website, where you can use coupon code SMASH, and that will give you a 30% discount as well. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Hill. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, hopefully we'll get you on again soon.
Great, Sam. Love to be back. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.